And we're going with our recording. So, John, thank you so much for joining us. I know you're a CA student rep. Do you want to introduce yourself to everyone who is watching?
Absolutely. Hi, my name is John. I'm a CA student rep. So basically what that means is I'm currently a university student that's studying accounting and finance. I'm in my second year at Curtin and I'm really happy to be here. This is my first time working with Illuminate and hopefully I can share a bit about my journey with you guys and also learn about your projects and give a bit of feedback back and forth as well.
Yeah, and it's been great having you drop in on some of our teams this morning from all the different schools that we've had. So obviously you are part of Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand as a student rep and learning more about that. So what does that sort of whole difference makers means to you that can inspire our students about what accountants are doing and creating and making happen in our community?
So how I see it is what difference makers means to me is that with a CA qualified, qualification is that accountants are becoming very specialized now. So you're looking into going to a specific area, you're looking into very specific skill sets where you're advising on one particular topic. And the second thing is that you want a globally recognized degree where you can travel to different places and work in international places and still without needing to retake any exams, being able to travel to places and work there and meet new people and absorb the culture and also advise different businesses as well. So that's what I think for me what difference makers mean is meaning not just making a difference in your local area but also going to far away place and making a difference there as well.
And obviously, what does your role, knowing and understanding finances, what does that mean to set you up for the future? Obviously, we're talking about starting new ideas and new businesses, so I'm sure of that as well. But just managing your money is good for life as well. So what does that mean for you, and why do you think that's so important?
For me, I'm a university student. So half the time, if you're not managing your finances well, then you'll find yourself falling behind in a lot of different places. One is like you may just end up buying food that's a bit cheaper than usual, something that you won't enjoy eating. But also in other areas is that you also need to think about how you're going to pay your car insurance, how you're going to pay for petrol. So things in life in general requires you to kind of keep tabs on like what's coming in terms of income and what's coming out in terms of expenses. And it's even though it's as simple as that, it makes a huge impact in terms of building really good habits, because you want to be able to build those good habits for when you do have increasing monetary responsibilities. So say, for example, in the future, you buy your own house and you have to pay off mortgage. So those are the different skill sets that you need to kind of practice now, which sets up yourself up really well in the future, because it's going to be a lot harder in the future. But because you've already got down packed, like I know what's the different budgeting skills I need to look into. I know how to create an Excel spreadsheet with that automatically calculates everything for me. That's something that you want to start right now rather than having to start last minute in the future when you start to buy things and finance for things.
And our teams have to create 2 financial documents as part of the challenge. They've got their establishment costs and profit and loss, and I want to ask you about each one of them individually because I think there's some really good skills there that we can talk about. But in terms of the establishment costs, going through the items, how many of them you need, the unit price and working it out, what are some tips for teams to think about in creating their establishment costs and what actually even goes on there in the first place?
Yeah, so a couple of things that I can think of as a uni student is that think about what are you selling? Is it a product? Is it a program? And then think of deconstructing that. So say, for example, it's a watch or say it's a clothing item. It's like what goes into a clothing item? We know we need fabric. We know we need stitching. We know we need people to kind of assemble it. Think about those different things and do a lot of research because there are similar things out there in the market already that you can think about how much it costs them to make it, and then sort of look at to how does that align with what you're making as well, because you don't want to be pulling figures out of the thin air. That's completely inaccurate. You want to see what's already existing out there in terms of data, pulling those data in and then looking at how similar it is to what you're making, and then trying to use those figures that's already existing to kind of inform what you think these unit prices is going to be like, as well as making a few assumptions here and there, because we do live in an imperfect world where you kind of have to think about your target audience and what is your target audience going to want and plan ahead for these costs.
You keep going.
Oh, no, I was just moving on to profit and loss, but
One of the things I will add with the establishment costs is also to think of everything you need to buy before you open the doors for your customers. Before you have the first user that uses your platform, or you open the doors. And it's all the furniture, it's all the items, it's all the things in the back end as well that you need. Sometimes some people think, oh, I've put my whole staff wages in there. Only pay for the staff until you open those doors. And then we move on to the profit and loss, which is where those are, which is obviously going through month by month, looking at your income, how much money you're going to make, your cost of goods sold, and your expenses. Obviously, maybe if we work through each of those categories, because I think there's some different tips and tricks for each of them. And so, John, what's some good tips for forecasting revenue and starting to think about how we're going to get, how much money we're even going to make in the first place?
In my particular opinion, is that in the very first few months, you're probably making quite little or quite minimal, but that's something that you need to forecast. And that's where like the establishment costs and your profit and loss forecast kind of like complement each other, because you know that you're not going to make a lot, but at the same time, you're managing it. So you're at least breaking even, or you're at least minimizing as much expenses that are coming out as possible. In terms of trying to determine what's making sure that you understand your revenue sources really well helps as well. Making sure that you understand how the income's coming in and cash flow. That's really important, because you don't want to be that business that is generating a lot of revenue, but the cash flow comes at the end of the year. So, but then all your expenses are monthly. So you're losing a lot of money every single month, but then your large cash flow comes afterwards, because then that's maybe something that you need to consider as well.
Do you want to explain cash flow as a thought? Because I know what it means. I've obviously run businesses and carefully watched the bank balance. But what's the difference between cash flow and just having money on your financial reports?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I mean in very simple terms is that when you make money, it may not hit the bank until a later date. So you want to make sure that it's coming in your cash flow, as in it's coming into your bank at predetermined times that you can calculate and forecast for. So if, for example, if your cash flow comes at the end of the year, it means that you can anticipate that money to come at the end of the year. But at the same time, your expenses are still incurring every single month. So you can divvy that cash flow out for per month in terms of income, but until that money comes in and you can use it as something that's tangible, then it's something that you need to consider.
And I guess then going back to the revenue, one of the things that, like, we've done examples around cafes before, it's pretty quick and easy to sort of think about that. And often for the forecasting, it's how many can you produce in an hour? How many hours are you open as well? Because you obviously can only service so many customers at a given time as well. So when you're thinking it through, maybe it's around how many customers do I expect to have at this time, and how much can I actually serve, and that's how you can start to set your prices from there. What about cost of goods sold? Can you introduce the concept of cost of goods sold, because that's the next part of our profit and loss forecast?
With cost of goods sold, I think even I'm a bit hazy on this side. Do you think you want to explain that for me, Adam?
I can help you out. Cost of goods sold is basically anything you need to buy before you sell it. So if you're going to run a retail store, then you obviously, every item that you're selling to your customer, all the books on the shelves, or the shoes in the back shop, you've already paid for. So cost of goods sold is all those physical items. For our digital solutions, there's not as much. And so basically anything you need to buy in advance is a cost of goods sold, and anything you obviously then just hand straight out or sell to a customer. And obviously, you want to be buying it for less than you're selling it. So there is that, and obviously link it to how much you're actually selling. You don't want to be buying 10 times more stock than what you're selling, because otherwise you're going to have to buy a warehouse or something else to host it all in. And then we move down to expenses. So there's quite a few categories on the expenses table that is provided as a template. Any tips, tricks, thoughts? Where should the students go and have a look for some ideas there, John?
In terms of expense, it comes back to kind of thing like cost as well. So you want to look into things like breaking down, as one of the common things is, are you storing it somewhere? So warehousing costs. Are you using electricity? What's the rent like? Because a lot of places do use factories, or are you outsourcing this all the manufacturing so you can produce something for less cost? So these are the things that you kind of want to start off with. It's like, what is the product? How are we going to create that product? What are the different things that's going to come into it? And then is it going to be housed in a warehouse? Is it going to be housed in a factory? If it is, then what's the different costs associated? So think utilities, think everything in your own house too. to be honest. So things like, what do you pay in your own house? You know, you need to pay for electricity, you need to pay for the rooms, you need to, if there's access to internet, then you may need to pay for that as well. So just having a bit of research into that. A lot of market research is really good in terms of that.
You've talked about research. Have you got any hints or tips for our teams with their research? Where should they start looking for some of these costs? Because they've never encountered them before.
Yeah, so when you're talking about cost, going on to I guess the product or looking for similar items online. So for example, you're selling a watch that has a bit of a different design, then you may just want to look at what the watches on the market are already. What are they custom to make? But on these specifications or items or descriptions, it actually gives you very good like itemized descriptions where it says this is the process that they use, this is what the type of wristband that they use, and then from there you can just research the cost of how much current factories are producing selling those for, and then using that to inform your own prices.
No, that's good. I think one of the best places that I ever recommend to go and have a look at, because staff wages is often the most expensive part of any business, is the Fair Work Ombudsman has some really great resources for you to actually calculate pay rates so you're not underpaying your staff. And it's always just a good thing to know as well, so that you know if you're getting underpaid as well in a job, where to look. So with that, we've run through the establishment costs, we've broken down the profit and loss table a little bit. Students can have a look at the template to understand that a little bit more. You've talked about the research. What are your final tips, words of wisdom for our teams that are completing the Illuminate Next Gen Challenge, John?
Well, I don't have many tips or words of wisdom, but something that I can leave you guys is to not stress, have fun with it, because that's the idea behind it, is that you're having fun, you're learning something, and work as a team as well, making sure that everyone's ideas are heard, because that's where it really comes down to, is that you're really making it the most out of the experience that you have right now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, John.
No worries.